So welcome everyone. This is the later in July TELedvisors webinar, and our first presenter today is Stephen Kolber. Stephen Kolber is a public government school teacher who has been teaching English, history and English as an additional language for 10 years. He leverages technology to collaborate, share teaching ideas and develop teachers in a wide range of activities, including TeachMe, running #Edureading, which is an online academic reading group, being part of the #AusEd Twitter group, and taking groups of teachers to Cambodia to run teacher development workshops with teachers across Borders Australia, and Teachers Education Review podcast and his own YouTube channel, Mr. Kolber's Teaching. So I'll pass you over to Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I'm not a big, not fully across learning design. So I've got the chat open in a separate window, and I'm expecting that you will tell me to stop or slow down, or that you don't know what the hell I'm talking about at points, because obviously I'm coming from, I would imagine, a different context to most of you. I'm presuming, I could be wrong. Let me check. Yeah, lots of university people. And, oh, that's the wrong tab. So, when my computer cooperates, I'll be talking about collaboration and learning, so asynchronous for global and synchronous for local. There are all my various things. I won't go into too much detail, but my big thing is instructional video, so producing just that, instructional videos for flipped learning or blended learning. I'm currently sitting in our instructional design lab, which is for a high school probably state of the art. I think there's a whiteboard over there, green screen in the corner. We've got a swivel for classroom observations and things like that. And thank you, Colin, I appreciate that. Hopefully a lot of it is universal. Just as an example, so the picture on the bottom of the PowerPoint is the Flipped Learning Level 1 course that had, I think, 40 experts from across the world, and I was one of those. Just finished filming a whole series with ClickView on how to make instructional video, and that was pretty exciting because they had really nice Swish cameras and we did very high quality stuff. In the right hand corner, that's the Monash Online Teaching Interactivity course that I'm pretty sure is a MOOC, so you can do it for free. And there's a couple of examples of me in there teaching and doing that sort of stuff. I'm assuming that everyone makes instructional videos anyway, but it's kind of weird to be showing pictures of a room that I'm sitting in, but the middle top picture that you're looking at is basically everything that we do without a budget. So that's a whiteboard that I bought secondhand for cheap. And basically you cut it out, you put a nice piece of glass in the middle, you put LEDs around the outside, then you light so that you can basically teach as you would with a whiteboard, but via a camera, with a wireless camera, as you can see on the tripod there. And the idea is in the top right hand corner, so the students watch differentiated videos from their maths, being the example there, from their maths teachers, and this is the sort of thing that I talk to all sorts of people about. But today I'm going to focus more so on these two things, which were kindly sort of forewarned by Wendy. So Edureading is a group for teachers, researchers, academics and learning designers to come together around a shared reading of an academic article, and TeachMe, which initially were in-person gatherings and now have become increasingly online and increasingly technical. I don't know how technical it's necessary for me to go into things, but I've recently just worked out how to kind of stream across multiple platforms for free and how to kind of spit the chat from all platforms into one place. So that to me is exciting anyway. So Edureading, we're currently in our 18th month, so we've been going for about 2.5 years or so. Every month we read a different article, so the case against grades, gamification, what works in professional development, what doesn't work in education, sort of reasonably accessible pieces, and then as teachers from whatever context we are in the world and whatever context we teach within, we come together and we share around core questions that I create. So it's kind of open source university ran by myself as a high school teacher. So this is what it looks like. Basically, as I said, we share asynchronously. The purposes of being able to do it internationally, because initially it was like, we'd have a Zoom meeting would be the easy idea, but that excludes a whole sort of bunch of time zones, most notably the US and Canada. We're kind of on about 12 hours, so we use Flipgrid, as you can see, and these are all the people that are in it, but it's obviously, we're all busy people, so it's kind of drop in and drop out depending on the month and the article and how much time you have available. The current article we're doing is training the brain or tending a garden, students' metaphors of learning, and do they predict self-reported learning patterns. So that's the kind of juicy stuff to get into. With the article is basically about, as we would all know, there's different metaphors for learning, and this article is trying to establish if there's a correlation between the metaphor that you have of learning and your success at school. So for a small example, I think one of the students had an idea that like the typical work metaphor. So if you see learning work, does that mean that you receive higher scores than someone who sees it as, say, a mystery or as kind of a building up of a library or a bank of ideas, or all those sort of things. So it's open to everyone, obviously. So if any of this stuff kind of floats your boat, there's various places you can come and pick it up. And of course, there's a different article every month, and that's usually democratically chosen. So people kind of just, I'll throw out a bunch of different topics that might be interesting to people, and then we'll see who picks it up from there. And a big part of the learning, I think, is not so much, and initially we had a lot of sort of Melbourne, Victorian-based teachers, and so everyone would be, just saying, all sorts of acronyms that we all knew but no one else did. And so making it a lot more international and asynchronous really freed it up. And so a lot of the learning that's happening is around, well, in the UK, we have, this particular thing, and then everyone's, understands the context first and then why their explanations go in that direction. We have a very active French participant, and so he always has really interesting things to say, because France has a very laissez-faire kind of, as perhaps you may or may not know, they're very kind of prone to strike, and they're not especially willing to be told what to do. And so as a result, we, from an Australian perspective, are always saying, well, there's this standard and this rule book and this kind of, we have to follow this. But in France, it's very much the opposite of that. They're very open, and therefore a lot of these topics are, a little bit different to how we interpret them. There's been 2 spin-offs, sort of people that heard about this idea through a podcast or a video or friend, colleague, whoever. So Edureading is the independent education union, and they ran a model, but they has culminated in a webinar, whereas mine typically culminates in a Twitter discussion and the video aspect of Flipgrid all throughout the month. And so people find different ways to kind of access and engage with the learning, whether it's via a group message on Twitter, or via the Twitter chat, which is live discussion, or via the kind of videos and checking in and sharing their thoughts there. And also one that may perhaps be more of interest to you, working in an LND Reads, which is Learning Designers Reads. So again, that was based off the exact same model. And this is the first article. I don't think they progressed beyond the first article. And I think that's Edureading, I think, ran for 4 or 5 months. So other people picking it up with a different group and a different community. I think there's real validity to the idea, but both of those are kind of defunct at the moment. But, it's a very easy idea to spin off from. So just to wait for the screen to catch up with me, TeachMe, if you're not familiar, which I would imagine that you're not, are short presentations, 5, 7 or 8 minutes with a timer, so someone will cut you off at those times if you go over. It's open to everyone, so in the past we have had lecturers, academics, teachers all together. Give me a second. Free from commercial interest, so you can't come on and sell whatever product you're trying to push. Everyone has an equal voice, which is why you cut people off at the time limit, and it's run in a democratic and collective form of distributed leadership. So essentially, The one coming up is being run by someone else, but I kind of just facilitate the technological elements of kind of, lots of Google sign-up forms, setting up the stream, setting up kind of emailing everyone out and organising things like that. And let me just check chat. Colin says, have you found that your teaching practice has evolved as a result of your involvement in these communities? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really useful to have a global perspective. The thing that I hate most at the moment is people who begin sentences with, well, at my institution or at my place or in my class or in my room or in my school. And I think this kind of forces you to sort of broaden out the lens, let's say, and open it up a bit more to the world and consider that just because things have always been done in a certain way, that's the, doing things as we've always done it, as people famously say, is probably the wrong approach. And there's a whole world of different ideas out there. So this is the in-person TeachMe element. You can see me almost wearing the same shirt, not exactly the same. But so basically we'd go to different institutions. The top left was at Griffith University in Brisbane. Well, actually the pub just across the road. But we ran along with a conference. The National Education Summit was at the Melbourne Convention Centre. We've run it at different schools. So my school twice, Australian Catholic University in Fitzroy, Kew High School, and others. And then obviously that was ground to a halt, as you might imagine. So then we had to dump online, of course, and this is an article that I wrote and had published on the Educator Australia about basically the fact that TeachMe has brought people together from across schools and contexts, because that's sort of the only thing that really gets me excited. And just for some context, so this is sort of how it started. So during the bushfires, if you remember back to then at UT, yeah, well, I guess so. If you remember back to the bushfire times, Aussie Ed, a group of Australian education people, every Sunday run a Twitter chat, and we felt like we should do something about the bushfires, despite the fact that everyone was in a bit of strife at the time. So we got Dylan William, John Bergman, Tara Martin, and yesterday Sybil Kulmaran, who was like a top 10 teacher of the year in 2019, last year. And Eddie Wu, if you know who that is. And we got all these relatively famous people and ran an online webinar and raised, I think, $2,800 or something. So it was very much like a telethon approach, and that's kind of how we worked out the video elements of how to do it. And then TeachMe, one thing was run through Microsoft Teams, which sort of limits your audience a little bit because they require a Microsoft login. But that was the first one that showed that what we'd done for a charity, we could also do for a TeachMe. And then since then, I've run these 4, with the agency one just being last Monday. So I don't know, we had Cara and Adrian Pickley, who are sort of big educational names. We've had lots of important researcher people that you may or may not be aware of from the kind of academic sphere in Melbourne. And up next is this event that I should have updated the picture of, because we've got all these people again that you may or may not be aware of, and we're talking about creating curiosity and all that sort of stuff, STEAM, STEM, all those types of things. And in term 4, we're currently looking for a new topic. So if you've got a particular passion project, as to remind you, we did New Futures, which was all about what we'd do after COVID, challenging teacher bashing and the role of democracy. That was a pretty fiery one and political. The bottom left has been cut off a bit, but that's let's get teched up, and then all about agency. So we talk about big themes and ideas. We're looking probably to do one differentiation up next, and one on kind of teaching practice itself rather than the sort of big ideas. But if you want to register to attend, we're at bit.ly/tmmeld, TeachMe Melbourne. We're all on Twitter and all that stuff as well. We keep a website updated and all that sort of stuff. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'll stop sharing and you'll hopefully see me go, my big face, which is slightly cut off. So yeah, if you've got any questions, by all means, swing them my way. Otherwise, that's the end of my ramble.
And that was great.
Cheers.
If anyone's got any questions for Stephen, you can grab the mic or put your hand up, put it in the chat.
All right, Colin says, how many people do you have actively help run this? Depends, so let me think. Because that's the thing about the internet, is that the numbers are important. So for example, like our TeachMeets, we get somewhere between 300 and 600 people watching the VOD that's produced after the fact. Edureading by its nature is kind of much smaller, so we might have 6 or 7 people fully engaged with the video and the chat and the discussion in the various forums. But yeah, so TeachMe has become surprisingly bigger than we thought. When it was face-to-face, it would be like, 15, 20 people, because it would usually like be Friday afternoon. And so teachers finish a week of teaching and then come and talk to other teachers. That's a very niche thing to be doing. And Edureading, the same thing. There's not that many educators who are actively reading research and kind of relating it to their lives. So similarly, that's a smallish group. But yeah, the TeachMeets, for some reason, now that they're online, have become quite populist for some reason. So.
Great, thank you, Stephen. I'd encourage everyone to give a round of applause in the chat. There's another question from Kate. We've got. You can take that one if you like, Stephen.
Yeah, sure. Purpose, experience, practice, etc. One of the issues is that generally already savvy. Well, for us, like a lot of the teachers, like it might be their only exposure to educational research. Obviously, we've had relatively experienced researchers, but we get mostly early career researchers who are kind of trying to find their place in the world and have sort of time to jump on and do a frivolous, non-article producing bit of learning with us. But yeah, the breadth is good. So we get across multiple continents, usually France, the UK, the US, and Australia. And in terms of breadth of experience, we've got primary school, secondary school, university, and some adult learning context people. But the hard part is kind of, as always, expanding your network beyond the kind of whatever setting you're in. So that's always the challenge.